so just before I touch on that, actually pulling in your point about the way that churches engage with sort of within missions and ministry, global ministry, I think that the reason why a lot of churches are more comfortable with doing that is that the terms of engagement are still on the UK churches. And actually the truth is that most people are okay to give away money, but they don't allow those partnerships to transform who they are as a church. And so it's easier then to go into the so-called mission field because you're still afforded a certain level of power and there's still a certain level of privilege that you are afforded within that. And so I would say even in people making that decision, it's not true to the gospel, because there is a certain extent of it where you're choosing to do that because you know that you can step into a place and people will make room for you. And I think that as churches, we need to get better in those international partnerships in saying, can we articulate how this relationship is changing who we are? Not just what we do and the money we give, but can we say, this is how our theology has been challenged and this is how we've adapted based on the relationship we have with a church in South Africa or something. This is how our sung worship is evolving because of this relationship. And actually the truth is, it's tokenistic because we give away money and then that's it. We don't allow these people to speak into the way that we operate because actually at the end of it, we don't think that they're worth anything to offer. And so coming back to the question on the way that churches responded to Ukraine, I didn't want to answer this question with just my opinion. So to bring in some stats, and I know stats can be a little bit, they can be a bit of a distraction, but most churches in the UK give to the Disasters Emergency Committee. There's quite a few faith-based organizations within that. And I did a bit of a comparison on how much money was pulled together through the appeals. For Ukraine alone, so about 13 or so million Ukrainians have been displaced. The DEC brought in £400 million for 13 million people displaced, approximately. I tallied up the numbers of Afghanistan, Syria, and the Horn of Africa, so the drought that was going on there. Collectively, there was about 53 million people across those three countries, regions, and only 143 million pounds. So it's 400 million versus 143 million pounds. And so we then have to ask the question using the lens of racism. Now, racism is a structure of hierarchy that denotes value of being, value of knowledge, value of power. And so if we use that lens and then ask the question, what is it that determined a differentiated response, not just with one country, but even the scope of people and the number of people involved in Syria, Afghanistan, and the Horn of Africa? And so for Christians, we have to be able to have more critical thinking in asking the questions, how do we allocate our resources equitably? Not just sort of, this is where the wave is, but the gospel requires us to do this. So we have to ask the question, who is the most undervalued? Who is the most forgotten about? Who is the most marginalized? And then we direct our resources there, be it financial, be it, people being on the ground, however that response ends up looking like. But we have to think about equity when we are distributing out the resources that God has given us.